Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the best and the worst books that I read in 2022. So my reading was a little disappointing this year, mostly because I didn't read as much as I was sort of planning to. I didn't read as much as I wanted to. I've been in a pretty big reading slump for about 6 months. Yeah, reading was a struggle for me this year. I think I read, as of right now, the day that I'm filming this, I read 31 books, which isn't bad, but the goal was to read 40. But yeah, I have quite a few books that I really enjoyed this year, and just a couple books that I didn't really like this year, so we're going to talk about all of that. The first book that I'm going to talk about is easily the best book I've read this year. It is my favorite book that I've read this year. It is my favorite book of all time now. It is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I've loved, or at least really enjoyed, all of the books that I've read by Taylor Jenkins Reid so far, and going into this one, I was surprised that, like, at first I wasn't really into it. It took me like a couple weeks to actually like get into it, but like once I got into it, I got into it. And like this is one of those cases where I don't really know how to talk about this book or like what to say about it. Like this book just left me completely flabbergasted, and I think that this book is the reason why I'm in a reading slump, because I haven't quite recovered from this book. Like maybe I think like nothing is ever going to be better than this or as good as this. But yeah, this is easily the best book that I've read this year. I think I would have to say second best would be Heartstopper Volume 4. This was the first book that I read this year, and before I read this, I actually like reread the whole series. And that was really fun, just getting to like revisit these characters and revisit the story before getting the new one. And all four of these are just like the cutest, like heartwarming thing that I've ever read, I think. And then the show came out. Everybody watched the show, and that was probably one of the better times of my life this year, was when the show came out, because I watched the show and then I reread the books. I think I watched the show like 3 times, I think. The show is really good. Next up is Starfish by Akemi Dawn Bowman. This one is YA contemporary, I believe. This book just made me feel like every emotion possible. I think it's the perfect coming of age story. Like, it was super heartbreaking but super heartwarming at the same time. I really want to read Summer Bird Blue by the same author, and I have it. I've had it for like a year. I don't know what I'm waiting for, but hopefully maybe in 2023 I'll be able to get to that one, because I really love this one. Her writing is just, I really love her writing. That was one of the things that I loved about this book, was her writing. The next book is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This one took me a while to get through. I think it took me like a month to read this. It had nothing to do with the book. It was just my reading slump. And I have no idea why. But at the end of this book, like as soon as I finished reading this book, I just burst into tears. I have no idea why. I really loved like the banter between the two characters, like the way that they just interact with each other was just, it was like my favorite thing about the book. One thing I didn't like about it though was that it was marketed as like a Rivals to Lovers, but that's like not what it was. Like it was anything but that. Like this man loved her before this book even started. The main character Nora, her sister Libby, like the sibling relationship is like a big part of this book. But her sister was like my least favorite part of this book. She was so annoying, and she was just a brat. Like I could not stand her sister. Someone said that this book was a drama with a side of romance, and I completely agree. Like this was mostly about Nora and her sister and like their childhood trauma, and it was a good story. Like the story was really good, but it's just not what I was looking for in a romance book. But I still really love this one. I think I gave this one 4 stars. So the last book that I have for the best books that I've read this year is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. Earlier this year, I watched Interstellar, and he's the main character in that movie, and I absolutely loved that movie. After I watched that movie, I decided to listen to his book, and it was really good. It's a memoir, and it's just different stories about things that happened in his life, I guess. There are a couple things about the book that aren't that great, but I think it was very entertaining, and I think that he's a very talented storyteller. So, those were the best books that I've read this year. On to the worst books that I've read this year. There isn't too many. And they're not, I guess they're not like the worst, like I absolutely hated them, but I think they were more just disappointing. So the first one is the Falling in Love montage. This one is a YA romance. This follows Saoirse, who doesn't believe in love anymore, and then she meets this girl named Ruby, and they agree to like take each other on cheesy like romantic comedy dates. I forget why they decide that they need to do that, but that's what happens. And then they end up falling for each other. So this book is called The Falling in Love montage. I think the falling in love montage was the least memorable part of this book. This book is mainly about Saoirse and her trauma with things that happened in her life, and like she's still not really like over those things, or she doesn't like know how to handle those things yet, and like that kind of affects her relationships with people. I just felt like pretty lukewarm about the romance. Like I said, like the parts of this book that are supposed to be like the most memorable, the parts that are supposed to make you feel the most things, were just kind of like bleh to me, which was a huge bummer because I was so excited to read this book for such a long time. The next book that was pretty disappointing was You by Caroline Kepnes. You probably already know what this book is about, especially with the Netflix show being very popular. But it's about this guy named Joe and his obsession with this girl that he sees at the bookstore where he works. This book is told in second person, which usually isn't my thing. I usually don't enjoy it. But for this book, it really worked for me. And I listened to it on audiobook, and the narrator for this book was really good. So I enjoyed listening to his. I just didn't really give a shit about any of the characters, so like anything that happened to them, like I didn't care. And I really didn't understand Joe's obsession with Beck, because like she's hot and that's about it. Like the premise of the story, like the whole concept was pretty interesting, but like the story itself and like everything that happened was just super forgettable. Like I do not remember a single thing that happened in this book. I read it in one day because I was like super obsessed with wanting to know like what happens next. Like I thought that it was all leading up to something like huge, and then I was just disappointed when it was over. I was like, really, that's it? It was just very underwhelming. So I gave it 2 out of 5. I have heard a lot of people say that the show is way better than the book, so maybe I'll check out the show and enjoy it. Like there are so many people who tell me that I need to watch the show, but like after reading the book, I've been like so put off by that, so I don't really know. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. This book wasn't necessarily disappointing, it was just bad. I'll give my own thoughts, but if you really want like a more coherent, more in-depth explanation on why this book was bad, then you should go check out Hannah's video from A Clockwork Reader. She just uploaded a video recently where she read 5 of Colleen Hoover's most popular romance books, and Ugly Love was one of the books that she read. And like the things that she said about this book were spot on. I remember when I did the mid-year book freakout tag video, I had said that I liked this book, that I thought it was good, but you know, times change. I've thought about it like a lot more than I did before, and like this book is just not good. If I remember right, it's about Tate and Miles who like get together as like a friends with benefits type of situation. on the condition that she doesn't like get feelings for him because he's not emotionally available right now, and like he makes it clear to her, but you know, of course she does. I found the main character Tate to just be really annoying. Like, she's a total pushover, and Miles was just like super manipulative and like douchey. It is told in dual point of view, so we get both her perspective and his perspective. His point of view was told from his past though, so we're getting like his backstory kind of like from his point of view, like the things that happened in his perspective in his chapters. Very heartbreaking, but at the same time like just very like, it just made me feel like ick, you know. I just think that this book is like a very good display of a toxic relationship, and for young girls to be like romanticizing the stuff in this book and just looking up to it and idolizing it is just a little bit concerning to me. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video is The Words I Wish I Said by Caitlin Kelly. This is a collection of no, it's not. This is a collection of poetry. This is a collection of poetry, and while I related to some of the things that she wrote in here, I think this collection was just like unoriginal. Like, it's nothing that we haven't seen before, and like the collection as a whole was just very repetitive. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. So yeah, those were the best and the worst books that I've read this year. You're probably not curious, but if you were curious as to all of the books that I've read this year, then you can go to my Goodreads. I'll have it linked down below. Otherwise, that is all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!